So yesterday, we walked everyone through Trump's national security strategy, the document that recategorized Canada as a resource depot for the US. But while everyone was looking south, something massive just happened in the north.
As if on cue, Putin and Modi just rolled out a new Arctic military pact, handing India access to Russian ports directly above us.
Warships, submarines, logistics support. The entire northern sea route is now open for coordinated Russian-Indian military activity. Suddenly, Trump's doctrine doesn't feel hypothetical anymore. It feels more like a prequel.
So today we're asking, if the United States wants control from the south and Russia and India are moving in from the north, what does that actually mean for Canada?
We want to know what you think. Do you think Canada is actually prepared for what's coming? Do you believe that Mark Carney can steer us through this storm? Or are we at risk of being boxed into a role nobody in this country voted for?
And just so nobody twists this, we're not talking about the people of Russia or India. We've traveled to both of them and we've spent time there. The people are warm, welcoming, and friendly.
Same with Americans. We love Americans. Half of our audience is American. This is about Putin, Modi, and Trump, three leaders who are making decisions most citizens would never vote for if they actually had a say.
Well, except for about 77 million Americans. What were you thinking, guys?
These moves aren't about safety or prosperity. They're strictly about power and control, which raises the real question. Is this pressure, or is it containment? Or is it the early outline of something we haven't faced in generations?
And just to be clear, this isn't only bad news for Canada. This is also a disaster blueprint for ordinary Americans too. So stick around because we'll be covering that later.
So let's start with Putin and Modi, because this pact wasn't a casual handshake. This was a calculated move. When two nuclear powers team up in the Arctic above Canada, that's not routine diplomacy. That's a power shift with global consequences.
The Arctic isn't empty ice anymore. It's shipping lanes, rare minerals, submarines, missile bases, deep water ports, and the future of global trade. Canada sits right in the middle of that, and for years, nobody cared. But now, everybody cares.
Putin's northern fleet is already up there. Nuclear subs, long-range missiles, radar arrays pointed at Europe. It's the core of Russia's military identity.
And now, India gets access to those ports. Murmansk, Vladivostok, the entire northern sea route. India isn't dabbling. India has entered the Arctic Club.
And that alone would be enough to raise eyebrows. But when you pair it with Trump's doctrine, which openly states that the United States must reassert and enforce its preeminence in the Western Hemisphere, suddenly Canada is in the middle of two expanding spheres of influence.
A northern military corridor run by Russia and India, and a southern economic and territorial doctrine written by Donald Trump. Or should I say whoever is managing Donald Trump, because we all know getting through a full sentence isn't his strong suit.
That is what we mean by the squeeze. And we need to pause here actually for a second, because when people hear Russia is expanding in the Arctic, some people shrug like it's just another headline. Listen, it's not. This is Vladimir Putin we're talking about.
This is the man who's been eliminating opponents for decades. Journalists, dissidents, political challengers. Anyone who stands in his way winds up poisoned, imprisoned, or conveniently falling off a balcony.
His biggest political rival, Alexei Navalny, didn't just disappear. He was jailed on bogus charges, sent to one of the harshest Arctic penal colonies on Earth, and died there under most suspicious circumstances imaginable.
And when it comes to borders, Putin has spent the last 20 years trying to rewind the map back to 1989. Georgia, Crimea, and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. He's been clawing back territory because he never accepted how the Cold War ended.
So when this man builds up forces, nuclear-capable submarines and long-range missiles in the Arctic, right above Canada, and then signs a military pact giving India access to Russian ports in that same region, that's not routine geopolitics. That's an authoritarian power trying to reshape the Arctic while the ice melts and new shipping lanes open up.
And here's the part that should concern everyone. Putin openly approves Trump's worldview. He said so. The Kremlin literally said that Trump's doctrine matches his vision.
So now you've got Putin in the north, Modi partnering with him, and Trump cheering the entire framework on from the south. That's not paranoia. That's three leaders with authoritarian instincts aligning their interests across the Arctic.
And let's connect the dots for a second. Trump's national security strategy says that Canada is part of America's strategic responsibility. That's the exact phrase that Russia uses when it talks about Belarus.
When a superpower assigns you to its responsibility, that's not a compliment. It means you're in our zone and we'll take it from here.
And now Trump has the ultimate justification in his mind anyway. Canada can't control the Arctic. Russia and India are moving in, so the United States must secure the region.
Convenient timing, right? It's right after Trump's team releases a doctrine that treats Canada as a territory, not a partner. Putin and Modi hand Washington a geopolitical gift wrapped in ice. The perfect excuse to say, Canada can't protect the Arctic, so America has to take charge.
It's almost like they're all working together. Well, let's talk about India for a second, because this isn't just Russia being Russia. India, it's not a side character either.
India is a rising power. Nuclear-armed, massive economy, huge navy, and big ambitions. And under Modi, it's been very clear. They're going to do whatever serves India's interests, even if that means partnering with Putin while he's still waging war on Ukraine.
From India's perspective, access to Russian Arctic ports is smart. It opens shorter shipping lanes, energy deals, and leverage with both the US and Europe. I get it. If you're sitting in New Delhi, this is cold strategic math.
But if you're sitting in Canada, this deal hits a lot differently. The danger is the alignment.
A nuclear-armed partner of Russia now has access to the Arctic corridor right above us. At the exact moment, Trump is telling the world that Canada can't defend the North and needs to be managed. That corridor is our water, our territory, and suddenly three powerful leaders are positioning themselves in ways that could squeeze Canada right out of its own Arctic.
Remember, the US already talked about our uranium, minerals, timber, Arctic access, and oil as North American assets. And they weren't subtle about it. They think our pantry is their pantry.
A northern threat plus a southern doctrine equals one thing: leverage over Canada. Leverage over our shipping, who gets access to the Arctic routes we own. Leverage over our energy, the pipelines and power grids the US already depends on. Leverage over our minerals, the critical resources that Trump openly calls North American access. And leverage over our defense choices. That includes who we partner with and what we're allowed to buy.
Now, let's talk about why Putin loves this moment. Russia sees Trump's doctrine and goes, perfect. You take the West, we'll take the East, and everybody stays in their lane.
This is the same Kremlin that praised Trump's new NSS publicly. You know, they said on Russian state TV that Trump's vision corresponds in many ways to their own.
That is chilling. When Moscow is applauding American foreign policy, the world should definitely be nervous, because both sides are talking about carving the planet into zones of responsibility.
Modi has his reasons too. India wants Arctic access for shipping, energy, and long-term influence. And Russia wants to dilute China's dominance in the Indo-Pacific, which is exactly why Moscow is pulling India closer. The Arctic access is the bargaining chip, not the end goal.
But it creates a massive new problem for Canada, because now the Arctic isn't quiet. It's contested, crowded, strategic, and Canada is the territory everybody suddenly wants a piece of.
For decades, Canadians assumed the North would stay frozen and untouched. Now suddenly, it's the new front line of global power.
Russia from above, America from below, India stepping in, China already circling, and Europe trying desperately to hold its ground.
And for the first time in our lifetime, Canada is not the background character. We are now center stage.
So let's talk honestly about the implications, because Canadians deserve clarity. Could this turn into pressure on our ports? Yes. Could this be used to justify U.S. control over shipping routes? Absolutely. Could this be used to pressure us into an American defense system? It already is doing that.
And could this be used to argue that Canadian sovereignty is too risky to leave Canada to itself? Definitely. That's the whole argument inside the doctrine.
Are we saying that war is coming? No, we're not, for now. But For the first time since the Cold War, Canada's geography is being treated as leverage. Look, Trump has not been quiet about how he sees Canada. This year alone, he said Canada offers nothing America needs. He claimed we take advantage of the United States. He said we rely entirely on the US for protection. And he repeated more than once, we don't need them, they need us.
That's not the language of an ally. That's the language of someone laying the groundwork to control a neighbor. This is the mindset we're dealing with, and it's frightening.
And here's the part that most people in the US don't think about. This doesn't just hit Canada. If you're watching from the States, this northern wall thinking doesn't give you more safety. It gives you higher prices, fewer partners when crises hit, and a greater chance that your kids get pulled into conflicts built on one man's power trip.
So let's start with the wallet, because that's where it always shows up first. If Trump turns Canada into a managed asset, that means more tariffs, more trade fights, and more chaos at the border. That's higher prices on food, energy, lumbers, cars. All the boring essentials that quietly make life miserable.
And while that's happening, the rest of the world isn't just going to sit around and hope that Washington snaps out of it magically. Europe, Japan, the Gulf, they're already signing new agreements with Canada because they need stability, not chaos. And here's what that means in real terms. The investment, factories, tech hubs, research centers, and energy products that should be going to the US, they drift north, or they drift across the Atlantic. America walls itself off, and other countries quietly collect the contracts, the partnerships, and the paychecks.
Then there's the security piece. If Washington treats Canada like a weak spot that needs managing, and Russia and India are building up in the Arctic at the same time, who do you think gets sent to stand on that ice line?
It's not the billionaires, kids, I can tell you that. It's regular American soldiers in yet another standoff, in yet another Cold War, literally, because the White House couldn't imagine a world where Canada is treated like a partner instead of a property line.
And the irony. The more Trump bullies allies, the less reliable they become. That means fewer countries willing to stand with the US when things actually go bad. You don't get loyalty by barking orders, you get it by treating people like equals.
So, when we talk about Canada building options with Europe, Japan, and the Indo-Pacific, that's not anti-American, that's a warning flare. If America keeps trying to dominate instead of cooperate, it's going to wake up one day and realize the world moved on without it.
And that hurts everyone on this entire continent. Canada, America, Mexico. Everyone who just wants a stable life instead of living inside someone's grand strategy experiment.
Now, here's where the mood shifts, because Canadians are not helpless. This is where option C comes in. Hope based on strategy, not wishful thinking.
We feel that this is exactly what Mark Carney's recent moves have been anticipating. Every move he has made in the past 6 months now clicks together like a puzzle. It isn't random trade talks, it's insulation.
He restarted trade negotiations with India and will be meeting them in the new year, right as Modi made an Arctic move. He strengthened ties with the EU through energy, minerals, and defense. He secured $70 billion from the UAE. He opened new channels with Japan. He accelerated Mercosur agreements. And he's building a diversified economy that doesn't fall to pieces if Trump lashes out.
Carney's message has been consistent since the beginning. The old relationship with the USA is over, meaning Canada can't rely on the United States the way they used to.
And now, the Arctic shows why. Canada needs partners who don't see us as a spare room in their house. Canada is building that network.
And then there's defense. Canada joining the SAFE program was a turning point. It gives us access to a $244 billion European defense ecosystem. No American veto, no kill switch.
The Gripen pivot matters too. If Canada builds jets here, maintains them here, and owns the intellectual property, nobody in Washington can ground our fleet with a software update.
And the Borealis agency is about one thing, building a northern shield that Canada controls. Radar, mineral, energy, Arctic infrastructure.
These aren't projects. These are escape hatches.
And here's the truth. Canada is not cornered. Canada is positioned. We are the crossroads of the Arctic, the supplier of minerals the world needs, the safe harbor for democracy, and the hinge between Europe and the Pacific. plus the northern spine of a global stability network.
The question is, do we act like a vassal, or do we act like the G7 nation that we are?
Well, Carney has chosen, and Canada is choosing. And whether Putin, Trump, or Modi like it, Canada has options.
Canada isn't in a corner. We're not a possession, and we're not a resource bank.
We're a country, a capable one, a strong one, a proud one, and we're just getting started, people.
And before you go, we've launched a brand new private face group, Unfiltered North. If you want a space to talk freely with like-minded people without trolls jumping in, the link is below. We'd love to see you over there.
And don't forget our Substack. It's growing like crazy, and that's where we post the deeper dives, the sources, and the stories we can't always fit into YouTube.
And make sure to check out the video below where we break down exactly why Trump's doctrine lines up perfectly with Putin's ambitions. It'll make today's story even clearer.
And if you found this valuable, hit like, subscribe, and please share this episode. It pushes the conversation outside our bubble and brings more Canadians, Americans, and everyone from around the world into the fight for clarity and sovereignty.
Canada is ready. The world is watching. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.